Welcome to Michelle's Life on Repeat. I'm Michelle, and on today's episode, I plan to talk about Alice in Wonderland Syndrome. And for some of you, if you have experienced that, it may be a trigger for you. So please, just giving you a fair warning in advance. When I was finished with this video, after having made it and talked about it and having the light from the supplemental light shining on my eyes, I immediately went into a migraine. So just to let you know, I would love to hear from you in the comments towards the end. Go ahead and let me know what you have experienced with this syndrome. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer them. Enjoy today's episode. Life on Repeat. I'm Michelle. I have chronic illness, but I try not to let that get me down. I also try to keep my hands and my mind busy with crafts, orchids, cooking, reading books. And recently, I read a book, or I tried to. It was Alice Through the Looking Glass. It's the sequel or the prequel to Alice in Wonderland. And I had a very, very hard time reading it. And I finally put it down. And I realized because I suffer with Alice in Wonderland Syndrome, which is a real thing, part of my migraines, I have sensations like you read about in the book Alice in Wonderland. And it was just too real for me. It triggered too much emotion. So I had to put the book away. But let me tell you a little bit about Alice in Wonderland Syndrome for those of us who have migraines. In the book, and probably the movie if you've seen them, Alice has hallucinations, or she's fallen down a rabbit hole and she becomes a different proportion in size than her mind thinks she is. So she's either too small or too big. She's either time's moving real slow or real fast. And you recall the book. It's not that foreign to a lot of us. And I experienced my first Alice in Wonderland Syndrome attack. I guess I was in 5th grade. I didn't know what it was at the time, and I still didn't know until about 2 years ago when I started having them again as symptoms prior to some of my hemiplegic migraines. So in the aura phase, I would go into the Alice in Wonderland Syndrome. And then I look back in my mind and I said, that must have been my 5th grade experience. And I'll share that with you in a minute at the end. I wanted to talk to you some more about the actual syndrome. With the Alice in Wonderland Syndrome, your brain is very much aware that you were in a distorted reality, but you can't do anything about it. It's still what you feel, what you see, what you hear. As opposed to a hallucination, maybe when you have had a high fever or you've taken medicine you've had allergic reactions to, and there is hallucinations that scare the bejeebies out of you. That's different than when you're in the syndrome. And it's a perception in the brain of your sensory world around you just out of skew. It generally doesn't last that long for most people. It could go from 5 minutes to 30. I think the most I've had it is about 30 minutes. And like I said earlier, it will come on as the aura phase prior to the head pain phase for me with my hemiplegic migraines. I have like this triangle vision source that goes, out from my arms. And this middle section, when I look forward, wherever I'm looking while I'm in that, is amplified. It's really close. So the ground is up about an inch or two from my eyes. So my feet walk with my knees really high to make sure I clear and not fall. But the side vision outside of that triangular up close is all far away. And I'm not only to confuse you, but let's add in that I can sense or feel time as opposed to knowing that there is time going on in life. I feel it whoosh by, so I can feel the rush of time either going really fast or really slow on those two outer peripherals. So it's really a distortion on my my presence of mind. The most recent attack that I had just received my Botox treatments for my migraines, and I think it's like 32 shots in the shoulders, neck, spine. I walked in fine, left fine, but it took about 7 minutes, my walk from, saying goodbye to everyone to the elevator, and I realized I was losing my perspective and I was going into this syndrome. And I got down to the elevator to the first floor, and I knew that I knew I had to get to my car to be in a safe place or sit there at the lobby of the hospital. Somebody would have eventually helped me, but I knew I could get to my van. It was just feet away. I knew I needed to call someone to come and get me, and I needed to call my doctors to let them know what was happening. So I did that. I was able to get to my van, call my son. He came and picked me up, and I called my doctors, and immediately they said, "Get back up here, please." So I said, well, as soon as my son is here, my son came, he brought my walking cane, and he gave me his arm, and together we took about 15 minutes to get back up into the elevator and down the office to the doctor's office, because at that point I have entered the hemiplegic stage and I am wobbly and off balance, and time is still whooshing by. It's really, really bizarre. And we got back to the doctor's office, and he sat me down and he brought in the nurses to see, and while he was asking me what else was I experiencing. So I told him, the ground gets really close, the sides get really far, the movement with time, sounds are really funny, colors are super bright, deceptionally bright, like, wow, I'm in Candyland, it's beautiful. And I was able to share that with him and the nurses so they could learn more. I guess it's not uncommon, but it's not common that every neurologist will see it that frequently in their practice. So I sat there for a while, and then I could tell I was coming back. It had been 30, 40 minutes since the onset, and I was able to walk straight. I was, my son was still there hovering over me with his elbow out and holding me. But that by that point, the pain had started in the brain. And so the doctor reminded me, take all your pills, take all of them. So I did. I took the muscle relaxer, the stomach pill, the pain pill, and then the extra pain pill that he has me take when I go into a severe hemiplegic migraine. And I went home and slept for 6 to 8 hours and woke up fine. But that is an odd sensation. And luckily, every time it has happened, from the moment I start to feel like something's not right, by the time I was going in the elevator, pushing the button and walking in, I knew something was happening, and my mind was able to say, oh, it's happening again. And when I go back in history, I've had a couple of these episodes as an adult, and I'm only able to look at the person that might be around me. They've generally been when I've gotten an injection, like I was getting allergy shots one time. One time I was getting pre-opt for surgery, and it's something to do with the fasting and not enough water in my body, and the prick of the needle and the startle reflex. All of it together will trigger for me. So at those times, I was able to look at the people next to me and say, you have about 5 minutes before I've lost my ability to speak, talk, and stand up. Please call my husband, or please call this person. And they take my children. Scarily, it happened a few times when my children were little. And sorry that they had to witness that. I don't even know if they remember, but I remember. And I know that the nurses took them in and gave them coloring books and things to do while my dearest friend came and picked them up. And my husband came and picked me up, and the ambulance took me to the hospital. So it's scary when it happens, because that you're going to lose control. And anyway, it's not fun. It's not good to go back. That's why I can't read the book. Because when I try to read it, it's just too real and it doesn't feel good. It doesn't trigger good, warm, fuzzy feelings inside. The first time that I experienced that sensation, I remember it so clearly. I was in probably 5th grade at my elementary school. And I remember I didn't really like the teacher that much. But I don't know why I bring that up. I mean, maybe that's why I didn't share with the teacher that I wasn't feeling well. But what happened was it was lunchtime. It was one of those special days where we had lunch in the classroom. And on special days, we were able to have a soda pop. I remember that very clearly. So I had my soda pop and I was eating my lunch. And somewhere in that process of eating, I started slipping away and noticing that I was getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And everyone around me was pretending not to notice that I was getting smaller. Unfortunately, I knew something wasn't right, but I didn't know what to do about the not rightness. I come from a very dysfunctional, at that point in my 5th grade year, it was a very dysfunctional life that I had experienced in my home up until my mid-teens. And so I was worried, I was scared. I thought personally someone came by and sprinkled some sort of hallucinogenic medicine or something on my soda can to watch me have this reaction so that they could laugh at me. And that is a warped way of thinking, but if you knew where I came from, my father was addicted to drugs. And so I was exposed to a lot of stuff at a very young age. And so while I was in this experience, I'm shrinking and I just can't figure out what to do. I remember we cleaned up and we moved on and we had to do some information on the big chalkboard. And I remember the teacher wanted me to go up and do something on the chalkboard. And I kind of panicked. I thought I'm too small to reach the chalkboard and everyone's going to know that I have shrunk if I get out of my seat. And somehow that was the strongest of feelings and emotions that I had at the moment. I don't recall, it must have faded within 30, 40 minutes because I don't recall going to the nurse. I don't recall ever telling my teacher about it. I don't recall coming home and telling my mom about it. So I can't really say exactly what it was, but the feeling I had was that I shrunk completely down. Everyone else grew really big and life was going on, but it was distorted for me. The sounds around me were distorted. The colors were vibrant and distorted. And, well, I learned now when I read about it that for children, it is more common that they have it as a reaction to a viral infection that they have experienced. Whether I had a viral infection that day, that week, I will never know. But I know that migraines have shown up in my life throughout the many years. And presently, hemiplegic migraine is the most common form of migraine that I've been getting lately. That migraines, for me, that has become one of the auras. It doesn't happen all the time, and I'm thankful for that. But just in case you didn't know what it was, it is a real thing. If you care for someone and they keep asking you, is my hand big? Does my hand look swollen? It might be that they're experiencing that. And by all means, please let your doctor, your physician, your neurologist know, because it could be signs of other things going on in your body. And please work with your physicians because you may need an MRI or a CAT scan or blood work or a nerve testing or a tilt testing. There's a variety of things that they would love to rule out to make sure you're as healthy as can be. So please don't be afraid. Don't be alone. If you've experienced this, tell someone else. You're not going crazy. It's just your brain's being distorted. The balance, the chemistry, the wiring, it's just going haywire. And that isn't anything you can control. It happens automatically. So please talk with your doctors. But that is my experience with Alice in Wonderland Syndrome. I hope you never have to experience it, and I hope I never have to experience it ever again. But if it happens, I know to call on my helpers, my resource, the people that I call to for emergencies. Thanks for listening today. I hope you learned something. I appreciate your time. I appreciate the connectedness that we have. Me being able to make these videos makes me feel not so alone in the world of migraines and chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia. It makes me feel like I'm one with someone else. So thank you for joining. If you've subscribed, I appreciate that, and I will get more videos pumped out as quickly as I can. Thanks for stopping by.